Random House Audio presents Birds Without Wings by Louis de Bernieres. Read for you by Hugh Bonneville.
The Prologue of Iskander the Potter. The people who remained in this place have often asked themselves why it was that Ibrahim went mad. I am the only one who knows, but I have always been committed to silence, because he begged me to respect his grief, or, as he also put it, to take pity upon his guilt. Now that he is mad, and the sun has long since dried the rain that washed away the blood upon the rocks, and there is almost no one left who recalls the lovely Philothei, it seems to me that no one would be betrayed if finally the truth of it were known. With us there has been so much blood that in retrospect none of it seems believable, and it cannot matter much if finally I tell of the last misfortune that fell upon Philothei, sweet-natured, Christian, vain, and beautiful. We are a serious people here. Life was merrier when the Christians were still among us, not least because almost every one of their days was the feast of some saint. Little work was done, it seemed, but at least their revelry was infectious. Our religion makes us grave and thoughtful, dignified and melancholy, whereas theirs did not exact much discipline. Perhaps it was something to do with the wine. For them it was a precious and sacred thing, because they thought it was something like the blood of God, whereas for us the pleasure of it has always been soured since the prophet of God forbade it, peace be upon him. Sometimes we did drink with our Christians, and caught their high spirits in the same way that one catches malaria from the chill night air, but, left on our own now, there is a sadness seeping out of the stones of this half-deserted town. Ibrahim the Mad was one of our most entertaining when he was young. It was said that there was a smile at the corners of his lips from the moment of his birth, and from early boyhood he was a specialist in inappropriate interjections. To be precise, he perfected a repertoire of bleats that exactly mimicked the stupid comments of a goat in all its various states of mind. A goat that is surprised, a goat that is looking for its kid, a goat that is protesting, a goat that is hungry. His most popular bleat, however, was that of a goat that has nothing to say. This bleat was the perfect parody of unintelligence, empty-headedness, inanity, and harmlessness. If you want to know what it sounded like, just go up past the ancient tombs to where the lime pit is. It is in the wild ground near there that Ibrahim the Mad still watches the goats, even though he is no longer sane. You will soon recognize the bleat of a goat with nothing to say. Ibrahim used to do it quite suddenly in the middle of a conversation or at a solemn moment in a ceremony. One day he even interrupted the Imam, Abdul-Hamid Hodja, who was making some interminable point about the law, which was one of his habits, may he rest in paradise. This was under the plane trees where the old men sit in the Maidan. Anyway, Ibrahim crept up behind a tree, he was about 8 years old, and bleated quite suddenly when everyone else was listening quietly and respectfully. There was a shocked silence, and then Ibrahim giggled and ran away. The men looked at each other, and Ibrahim's father leapt to his feet, his face flushed with anger and shame. But Abdul-Hamid was a good-natured man, who was naturally dignified enough not to have to be concerned about offences against his dignity, and he put his hand on the other's sleeve. "Don't strike him," he said. "I was bleating myself, and now someone else should have the chance to speak." Ibrahim's father was called Ali the Broken-Nosed. In those days Ibrahim was a friend of my son, Karatavuk, and I can truly say that he was not mad at all. He was merely framed by God in a comical way. They say that for a madman every day is a holiday, but they also say that insanity has 70 gates. It is true that many of the mad are happy, as you can see by the idiots of this town who sit on the walls and grin and piss themselves, but I know that the gate through which Ibrahim travelled was the gate of unconquerable sorrow, and that his mind remains a cataract of grief. I think that back in those days many of us were maddened by hatred because of the war with the Greeks, and in all honesty I include myself. But Ibrahim was the one among us whose mind was disengaged by love. Ibrahim blamed himself. The peculiar thing is, however, that nothing would have happened to Philothei at all if other things had not been happening in the great world. So it is my opinion that the blame belongs more widely, not only to Ibrahim but to all of us who lived in this place, as well as to those in other parts who were bloodthirsty and ambitious. In those days we came to hear of many other countries that had never figured in our lives before. It was a rapid education, and many of us are still confused. We knew that our Christians were sometimes called Greeks, although we often called them dogs or infidels, but in a manner that was a formality or said with a smile, just as were their deprecatory terms for us. They would call us Turks in order to insult us, at the time when we called ourselves Ottomans or Osmanlis. Later on it turned out that we really are Turks, and we became proud of it, as one does of new boots that are uncomfortable at first but then settle into the feet and look exceedingly smart. Be that as it may, one day we discovered that there actually existed a country called Greece that wanted to own this place and do away with us and take away our land. We knew of Russians before because of other wars, but who were these Italians? Who were these other Frankish people? Suddenly we heard of people called Germans and people called French, and of a place called Britain that had governed half the world without us knowing of it. But it was never explained to us why they had chosen to come and bring us hardship, starvation, bloodshed, and lamentation. I blame these Frankish peoples, and I blame potentates and pashas whose names I will probably never know, and I blame men of God of both faiths, and I blame all those who gave their soldiers permission to behave like wolves and told them that it was necessary and noble. Because of what I accidentally did to my son Caratavuk, I was, in my own small way, one of these wolves, and I am now burned up by shame. In the long years of those wars there were too many who learned how to make their hearts boil with hatred, how to betray their neighbours, how to violate women, how to steal and dispossess, how to call upon God when they did the devil's work, and how to commit outrages even against children. Much of what was done was simply in revenge for identical atrocities. But I tell you now that even if guilt were a coat of sable and the ground were deep in snow, I would rather freeze than wear it. But I do not blame merely myself or the powerful, or my fellow Anatolians or the savage Greeks. I also blame mischance. Destiny caresses the few, but molests the many. And finally every sheep will hang by its own foot on the butcher's hook, just as every grain of wheat arrives at the millstone, no matter where it grew. It is strange indeed that if you should wish me to tell you how one young Christian woman died by accident in this unremarkable place, you must also be told of great men like Mustafa Kemal, and little men like me, and you must also be told the story of upheavals and wars. To speak selfishly, let me say that what remains with me and hurts me after the memory of the cruelty and unreason has been laid aside is the pain of having maimed my favourite son, Caratavuk. I will always be pained by the manner of his wounding because I brought it on him by my own hastiness, and this after he had managed to survive 8 years of war unscathed. Since those times of whirlwind, the world has learned over and over again that the wounds of the ancestors make the children bleed. I do not know if anyone will ever be forgiven, or if the harm that was done will ever be undone. Enough of this, however. The story begins, and he who slaps his own face should not cry out. The Imam visited Philothei on the day of her birth, which occurred in the early summer of the year 1900 by the Christian calendar. Philothei was the great beauty of the town, and in her short lifetime this caused her more difficulties than it brought compensations. The birth was, I suppose, unexceptional. The mother had drunk from a bowl engraved with verses from the Koran, and in which further verses had been dipped for extra assurance, and had slept with a cross on her belly for at least a week. In addition, a woman had gone for Mirimah Effendim in good time. Mirimah Effendim was our midwife in those days, and no one was more deeply versed in the arts of birth. Her mother and grandmothers had been our midwives since the first counting of time, and all of us had arrived safely thanks to them. Philothei came into this world when the southern wind was bringing lewd thoughts and insomnia from Arabia. I remember this because I myself was unable to sleep, partly because of the restlessness of my wife and children upon the floors and divans, and partly because of the dogs outside that had set up a howling in unison with the shrieks of the mother of Philothei. Even out in the courtyard, wrapped in my cloak, I lay sleepless, looking at the stars, and so, finally, I decided to walk about the houses. I was unable to resist walking towards the sounds of the parturition, and I passed the window of the Christian schoolmaster, Leonidas Effendi, who was writing furiously by the stinking light of a wick floating in a bowl of olive oil. This teacher was a bad character, stirring up trouble. In those days all of us—
Sample complete. Ready to continue?